I will switch to English because Finnish is not my strongest language. So good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Maurer. I work as a cloud advocate at Microsoft. I joined, I like always say recently, but it was back in February last year. And our team basically travels around the world. That's one part we do, to speak to our customers and speak at conferences and deliver content, but we also create content like online trainings and things like that. So that's basically my job, what we are doing. It's fantastic to be here. Like, it's like my first time arrived in like Helsinki airport. It was fantastic. Really, like, everyone is super friendly. The food is very good, I realized last night. So I'm super excited to be here. They also told me that everyone is sitting in the back, and I realized that's true. Well, which is probably a good thing because I had some pesto last night, so it's like better to be away from me for that. Okay, so if you ever have been to one of my presentations, you probably know that I first love to have like 2 minutes about speaking about Switzerland, right? To introduce that. This is especially helpful in the US because in the US we are basically Sweden. So I try to always explain that a little bit. So again, no worries, we will go into the topic very soon, but I want to show you a little bit about Switzerland. So this is how it looks like. At least on postcards, right? And then we have also data centers. So this is a typical Swiss data centers with cows in the front. This is not a fake. This is actually true, right? This is. I don't know if the cows are still there, but at least the data center is still there now. And then we are obviously famous for cheese, chocolate, watches, and banks. Did I hear a no when I said cheese and chocolate from the Belgium guy there? So, who thinks Swiss chocolate is the best in the world? What the hell? What the hell? Okay. So, who thinks the Belgian chocolate is the best in the world? Yeah, okay. Okay. That's actually good. No, I like that one. I was surprised. Usually, it's very clear that the Swiss chocolate is the best one. So, good. Yeah, we also have, when people ask me, you live in Switzerland, what's the best part about Switzerland? I always tell them, yeah, well, the flag is a big plus. Takes a while. So this is actually a true picture. Again, this is in one in the mountains. You can see that. But at 1st of August, we hang that big flag to celebrate. It's basically like 4th of July in the US. And so we hang that big flag there. You can see it's really, really big. You can also see the people here hanging it. So it actually is big. We also have an Air Force, by the way. So in the US, I always talk about, they like that when I talk about the Air Force, right? We also have that. The only funny thing is they operate only during business hours, right? So just, if someone wants to attack us, please, only 9 to 5, right? That's not allowed. They're also otherwise very skilled. Sometimes they fly over the wrong towns. They make the air shows and they missed the town and went to another one. And to make that even better, more Swiss, they were flying over a yodeling festival. Okay. So let's start with one of my favorite quotes from one of the best Finnish race drivers ever. Leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. And we're going to start with our presentation, right? Who, by the way, is Kimi Räikkönen fan in this room? Okay, good. You know that he now drives for a Swiss team? Okay. Okay. Good. So we are here to basically talk about Cloud Shell, Azure Cloud Shell. And I will show you a little bit what you can actually do with it. Who has used Cloud Shell before in the room? Awesome. That is awesome. Okay, so a lot of people have used it. Again, if you haven't used it, I'm going to really start up telling you, okay, how do you get started, and then go a little bit more in advanced stuff you can do with it, and how you can actually manage things there as well. So first, talk a little bit about why would we actually need that, and why do we actually need automation and things like that. So first of all, automation is a key, and I think for most of you working with Azure and working with the cloud, you know about that this is actually really, really important to save time, to have like lower costs, obviously, like the main reasons, but also to get more consistency, right? If I do something 5 times, I usually have like 6 different results. So there, obviously, automation helps very much. And then, especially if you manage resources at scale, or do configurations, orchestration, all that, you need automation, right? So we have different tools for that in Azure. And you will see there is much, much more even going on. We will have more of them in the future. But if you look at the Azure management tools, if you look at like what we call the Azure management tools in Azure, it's basically the Azure portal, like all of you probably have seen that. Then we use the Azure CLI, we have PowerShell, and then we have like a thing called CloudShell, which is integrated in the portal and gives you these experiences, right? We also have some automation tools. If you look at, for example, ARM templates, right, where you can do infrastructure as code, for example, where you can then run those templates. Doesn't matter, like also from Azure DevOps and other places to basically get your automation in the infrastructure up and running. We also have Azure automations and Azure functions, and there is like for different scenarios, we have both. There's also some rumors like that, like I think, not sure if we even talked about this, but Azure automation is there to stay. So like if you have customers using Azure automation, it's there to stay for that time. So we have different experiences there. Good, and so when you're working with Azure and you work with Azure PowerShell or Azure CLI, especially when you work with Azure PowerShell, I think you all know that. Like one of the first things I usually do when I run that, I basically go first and update my modules, right, to make sure that I have the latest version. And again, this takes some time. It's like very heavily to manage. I also install a couple of tools which I need on my machine. And if you are like me, I have a couple of different machines, so I'm running that on like a lot of different machines and my admin workstations and things like that. And the other big part, who had ever like troubles with logging in like to Azure using the Azure PowerShell modules? Right, yeah, a couple of hands. So that's like always, then you need to fix that before you actually can start doing work. And this is another point where CloudShell really shines, right? So we're going to address those things with Azure CloudShell. So Azure CloudShell is a web-based shell experience, if you will. It gives you already authentication. So whenever you log into the portal or to CloudShell, you're already authenticated, right? You don't need to do that again. You don't need to do like login into your PowerShell or wherever. It gives you a Bash and a PowerShell experience. So whatever you prefer. So if you like the Azure CLI, you can use that. If you like Bash, if you prefer PowerShell, then you can obviously use PowerShell as well. So we have those two experiences here. And then what CloudShell really does, it gives you a private and secure environment to manage that, right? It's your own environment. I often get asked, is this shared between different administrators and things like that? Is the stuff safe? No, it's per user, right? So what happens in the background is, this is basically running in a container, right? So we have basically a container running. We have thousands of containers running already, which are ready to be used with CloudShell. So think about, we have built an infrastructure in the back end, and then we just expose them, assign them to a user, and expose them using the portal doing a web solution. And then what we have, we install already like languages, programming languages, and tools, and PowerShell, like the latest versions usually, and integrate that. So if you log into that, you already have like things like Git, .NET, but also other things like open source technologies and things like that, which I will talk about in a bit, ready for you to use. So you don't need to take care of like most of the things, but you're also allowed to install things, right? You can also add things if you need to, and we will also have a look like that, how that looks like. Okay, so this session is going to be very demo heavy, so I'm going to show you a lot in that. We will not have a lot more slides, just a little bit of like explanation slides. We'll go through that, and then at the end we have some Q&A time for that. So let me start, especially for those who haven't really seen, but I also give some insights in Cloud Shell itself. So for even those who have used it, but haven't really like thought about what it actually is, it gives you some insights and some advanced configuration. So let me switch here. So what we do here, this is obviously the Azure portal. We're going to use different things in here. I'm going to use, again, a container like my Cloud Shell and open that up to manage that. What I did, I already did set up my Cloud Shell. So I did already like the first user experience. However, I then removed the file share, and no worries, I will talk all about that. So the setup, the first user experience now goes a little bit faster. So you can actually go through with the first startup, how that works. And what Cloud Shell basically is at the end, we just basically need Azure storage as well, right? There's a container, but you don't really pay for that. You only pay for the storage there, what you use. So we're going to set that all up from the beginning, and show you some advanced things there as well. So here we are in the Azure portal, and then we can start Cloud Shell by clicking on that symbol up there. And you can see here I get the first user experience. And then you can choose between Bash or PowerShell. So let's start with the Bash experience. And if you go into advanced settings, you can like choose the subscription, the region you want to have deployed at. We're going to take West Europe. And then we're going to have the resource group. I already picked an existing one. I'm going to pick an existing storage account and existing file share. If you don't have one, then Azure Cloud Shell will create that for you. So I'm going to attach that. And this will now take a couple of seconds, because I already created it. I use existing resources. If you do that for the first time, it obviously will take a little bit more time, because it creates the storage account and the file share for you. Right. So you can see here that I'm connected. I'm connecting everything. And I'm going to show you how everything is built in the background a little bit. So here we have our Bash experience, and let's make it a little bit better for you to see. Change the font, and then also like a little bit more modern. So here we have our Bash experience, and you would probably think that this works as you expect. You also have the Azure CLI available, so you can see here I have the Azure CLI, which you can then go and use all the commands and run directly against Azure. But you can also just, for example, navigate through the file system. So I have a folder called Cloud Drive, which is actually a mounted share. And in that one, I have a folder called Scripts, which I created. And then, obviously, I have some scripts in there. And here I have a CLI script, which I'm going to run, which basically just creates a Linux virtual machine, right? We're not going to watch that finish, but you get the idea. You can simply just store some files and things like that, and then run some automation directly from Cloud Shell, which makes it super, super easy. So now we switch to shell.azure.com. This is where you can also run Cloud Shell. And we connect here again. And you can see here I'm now in the Bash experience. Let's change font size again. And then let's switch to the PowerShell experience this time. So I'm going to switch, confirm that. And now it will load PowerShell for me in that container. And very important here, this is the same stuff, right? I still have the same folders and everything available to me. This is not a different environment. This is the same environment. So you can see here now I have the PowerShell experience loaded. You can see it's already authenticated. And if I run like get command, it's ACVM. You can see here I get all the commands like you would expect from a PowerShell console. You can also do a get help, get ACVM. And again, you get the normal, you get the thing, right? So it's like real PowerShell. It's PowerShell core. It's not like Windows PowerShell. It's a Linux container. I'm going to see that in a bit as well. So I can also do things like get command Azure. I don't just have the Azure PowerShell module. I also have other modules pre-installed, like, for example, Azure AD. I can go through that. And then I can also do get ACVM. And I can do things like name. And then like I want, start with Lin. So I get all the VMs. We start with that name. And I can also do something like, for example, with resource groups. So let me do that with the resource groups. Do Azure VM, resource group. and then I do, let's say, everything which is in every VM in a Cloud Shell resource group. So this is all the stuff I created. This is not like from Cloud Shell, but just to show you in that demo how that works. And then if you have a look at the modules, I told you there are some pre-installed modules available. So we obviously have like the AC modules, which I just used. Let me show you, there is more. So list available modules. You can see here a bunch, like all of the AC modules obviously available. I also try to, like we do usually update them. And then you can also see I have some other stuff here, which is pretty new. It's like the Exchange Online connector. So if you manage Exchange Online, you can do that too. Or for example, we also have the SQL module already pre-installed in that. And then we get a lot more, but we will have a look at that in just a bit, what you can do. So if you have a module which you, for example, is not installed, you can use the PowerShell gallery, and you can use the command find module. And this gives you, in a couple of seconds, a lot of modules. You can see, obviously, the Azure ARM and Azure AC modules are available, but you get the list, right? And you can also then find, like if you do Visual Studio and search for a specific module, you can go, and we can also install that like you would do that on your Windows 10 machine. However, it needs to be a PowerShell core module, right? Because it's a PowerShell core installation, you cannot run Windows PowerShell commands. So let's go to my home drive. And as I told you, it's the same container, so I also have my Cloud Drive folder here, or my share. And then on that share, again, I have my scripts folder. And if I go into that, you can see that I have a couple of scripts here. Again, the same scripts as you saw before. I could, again, run them. Right. So I can also download, for example, one of these. So if I want to download files, I could enter the path here, which is not super convenient. I can also upload a file if I want to. So I go to like code, repos, scripts, and then let's do Cloud Shell. And then we could like just select the file and upload it directly from here. I'm not going to do that right now. There's also, by the way, a more convenient way to download a file. So if I want to download one of these script files here, I just do export file, and then the name of the file I want to download. So let's do the Win one, then hit enter, and it will just basically download that file. So I could download that and edit that and then upload it again. I will show you some better ways of editing files, but this is an option you could do if you want to, for example, save that. And there are also better options, obviously, if you manage scripts. But again, something I will show you a little bit later. So something I want to talk about is the Cloud Drive. So what is actually that Cloud Drive? Or no, talk about the Azure Drive first. So Azure Drive is basically uses a PowerShell provider called Chips. So if I do that, you can see here, this is, by the way, the default experience. I can go and browse my Azure resources using like a file system type. So I can see here all my subscriptions. And then I can go into my subscription here. And then I see all my, for example, resource groups, storage accounts, virtual machines. And again, I can, for example, go, let's say, all my virtual machines. And if I list them, you can browse through that, and you can see all my virtual machines running here. You can also, this is not Cloud Shell specific. This is also works on you can install that on your local machine if you want to. But again, in Cloud Shell, that's even the default experience. So if I go back, let's do something else. Like let's go into my subscription again. Let's go to, for example, this time we take, let's say, storage accounts. And then you can see here, I list all the storage accounts, right? So this is a good experience to browse through, through your Azure resources if you like it that way. You can also then interact with them in that case. So the next thing I really want to talk about is basically the Cloud Drive. That's what I want to talk about. So with that, you have seen that Cloud Drive folder, right? So let's go back home, and you saw that. And this is a mounted file share for persistent files. So I'm going to show you how that works. Every Cloud Shell has that Cloud Drive. So there's also a commandlet get Cloud Drive. And then you can see here the configuration. So you can see which storage account I'm actually using. You can see the resource group. You can see the name of that specific Cloud Drive. And then you can also see the file share name I created for that. So you get all the information. And if we now go to the Azure portal, and you can see here the VM creation was finished, by the way. So if I go to my storage account, which I pinned here, no worries, I will zoom in a second. You have my storage account here, and if I go to Files, and then you can see here that I have my Cloud Drive folder. So let's go in that Cloud Drive folder. And then you can see here, what I have is my script folder, as you would expect, right? So this is really like, this is persistent storage, so if I store anything there, it will stay on that Azure Cloud Drive, on that file share. You can also see my scripts, and if I go back, you also have that console folder, where basically the container image, or the image from my user account is basically stored in that. So if I go back, let's go to scripts again. We can also interact here. So for example, we could also go and say, okay, let's create a new directory. Let's do that demo scripts. Create that, and if I switch back to Cloud Shell, have a look at the Cloud Drive folder. So you can see here, now I have my demo scripts folder here as well. So I can also go and remove that again. And guess what? It's gone again, right? So this is basically the persistent storage way. So if you want to store something, you don't get always the same container assigned, right? It also depends where do you actually run, and we just gave it to you, and then we remove it again. But everything you store on that cloud drive just stays there, and you can reuse it. So this was really the basics for everyone to understand. So again, Cloud Shell gives you a Bash or PowerShell experience, really what you prefer, right? I often get asked, why would you have Bash or PowerShell, and why would you use one over the other? It really comes to preferences, right? If you're like me and you come from the PowerShell side, I love PowerShell. I love the PowerShell objects and interact with that, so I can do that as well. And then if you're more like in a Bash, especially if you do one-liners and things like that, that's when I like it. Usually I do one-line commands in Bash. You can use the Azure CLI, for example. Then, okay, we can run scripts directly from Cloud Shell. We can use the Azure Drive to browse our resources in PowerShell. Again, this is also something you can install locally. It uses the ship's PowerShell provider. Again, you can browse your resources. And then we had a little bit of a look at the persistent storage, right? So how that works with the file share, the mounted Azure file share. You can obviously also mount more because it's basically a Linux container. You can also mount other file shares and things like that, which are reachable, obviously, by that container. Good. So let's switch into the next demo session. I told you it's very demo heavy. So what I want to talk about, I showed you how you can actually interact with files, download them, upload them, but why would I do that if I want just to edit the file? Why don't just do it in Cloud Shell itself? That's what we're going to have a look at, and then we also have a look at all the stuff we actually run in Cloud Shell, and actually how you can, for example, also do Git in Cloud Shell, and how you basically can easily manage your scripts. So let's go back to Cloud Shell. And let's have a quick look here. Let me quickly go back here. Sorry for that. Okay, good. So here again, we are in our Cloud Shell script session. If I do a dir here, you can see those scripts. And again, if I want to download them or upload new scripts, I can do that. But I can also edit those. So I can go, and since this is a Linux environment, I can do VI, Nano, Emacs, and others. So I have those available. I can use those to edit files. However, my big problem is that I never know how to exit VI. So there's something else which we can use, and that's called code. You can use Visual, this is kind of like Visual Studio Code or a port from that. So you can just open up code and the file, and you get syntax highlighting. You can see that. You can easily go, and I will quickly edit the file here. So if I just need to, for example, change something here in that script, I can just change that. And now I can easily go here and save that file. And now even the best part, just go and close the editor. That's awesome, right? So Okay, so these are the edit options we have. Again, there's much more. So again, I quickly want to show you the modules again. So let me quickly go through. Again, you have much more modules, as I just showed you, available in here. And again, I just want to highlight there, you can also see, like Azure, as I said, Azure AD, Exchange Online, or Power BI, SQL. There's much more in there, right? It's not just Azure management. It becomes much more than it is right now. So you can go to that. So let's have a look at some other tools here. So editing files here is great, right? But sometimes, like I have an on-prem Visual Studio Code environment. So why would I just go up there, upload files, and do that there? Wouldn't it be great to just locally run that? So let's open Visual Studio Code. I already installed the Azure account extension you can see here. And I also installed Node.js. That's what you need for these extensions here. So if you look at the Azure account extension, you can see here, I have a couple of options. I can sign into Azure, but I also have the option like Open Bash in Cloud Shell. So let's have a look at that. Let's just run that command here. You have seen it, I used that before. So then ask me, okay, which directory? And then we connect. Let me zoom in here a little bit. And so you get here, you can see here again, Thomas at Azure. So if I look at now what actually operating system that is, you can see it's a Linux container, right? So you can see it's an Ubuntu container with the Azure specific kernel. So again, if I then go to Cloud Drive, and I see my folders, again, you can see my own script folder. You can see again my 2 script files I stored there. What a surprise, right? Okay. So this was the Bash experience. Let's have a quick look at the PowerShell experience. That obviously also works. Again, we're requesting, getting that connected. And then you can see here, it also directly authenticates me. It builds my Azure drive. And you can see here, again, if I do that, a list of my subscriptions. Don't take a print screens of my subscription IDs, please, okay? So let's have another look. Something else. Again, there are a lot of features in there. So we have also, like this is a documentation space, Microsoft doc page, where we explain all of this. I basically show you. There's much more tools here. So you can see here I have Bash, but I also have other shells here as well. So if you're familiar with other Linux shells, you also have Azure CLI, AC copy, all the Azure tools basically already ready. If you are in containers, you have Docker, Kubernetes CLIs, database management, etc. Everything basically already in there, right, and pre-installed for you. And we also usually update them regularly. We also have some language support. It's not just .NET, but you can also see Java and Go, Node.js, Python, all of that like directly integrated in that Cloud Shell session. So somewhere else where Cloud Shell comes in handy is when you manage virtual machines, right? So let's quickly go to the portal. And here I have a virtual machine. And if I connect to a Linux virtual machine, I usually use SSH. And if I click on the connect button, it already gives me the command to that virtual machine. And then I need a SSH client locally. With WSL, that's not a big problem anymore. But the easier way of doing it is if I just go to my Cloud Shell. Sometimes think about like when ports are blocked or things like that. Like if you work in enterprise environments, sometimes you cannot really just do an SSH tunnel outside. So you can just open up that in the web portal, you paste that in, and you can basically connect to that Linux virtual machine. So in my case, I'm using a password. It also works with certificates. So if you're doing it the right way, you can also work with certificates here. And if I go into that, you can see here that's an Ubuntu virtual machine I created here. If I do uname-a, you can see here. And the funny thing, I'm not sure if you ever noticed, but we have our own Linux kernel, our Ubuntu Linux kernel optimized for Azure. So yeah, this is one of the things we can manage. However, what about Windows virtual machines and how can I set up a little bit more of management, right? I want to basically, like this now requires that I set up everything, like also do the network security groups and so on. So we also have something else. So I want to show you that. So we have a module here And I showed you already a couple of commands. So if you look at the PS Cloud Shell utility module, there are a couple of commands. I showed you, for example, get cloud drive. But there's also something I want to show you is, for example, the enter ACVM or enable ACVM PS remoting and the invoke ACVM command. So I quickly want to show you that, how that works, and how you can use those to manage your Azure virtual machines. So if you have a virtual machine and you want to enable remoting or PowerShell remoting, you can just run enable ACVM PS remoting. You then give the virtual machine name. And again, I'm going to run that now against a Windows virtual machine, but it also works obviously with Linux. So I give it name and the resource group. And then, okay, we say which protocol we want to use. And then we say, okay, that's a Windows virtual machine. Again, this would also work obviously with Linux if I wanted to. But I'll do Windows. And if I run that command, I did already run that because that takes a while. It will set up everything, also network security groups and things like that. So I did that. And now let's just connect to that virtual machine. Let's just first save my credentials here. Thomas. Okay. And now what I can do is I can do two things. So I could start with the invoke ACVM command. And then again, name of the virtual machine. I just enabled this. Resource group name. And then a script block, which I just run like against that virtual machine. Obviously, that would also work if you run it against multiple virtual machines. So let's just get the service, which starts with win, and then my credentials. So in a couple of seconds, it now creates that remoting session. In a couple of seconds, we will get back the specific services, starting with win. And you can see here, I get these services back here. If I want to have a more interactive experience, like to actually engage with the virtual machine directly, I can also do enter ACVM, and then the name, that virtual machine, resource group again, credentials, and then after a couple of seconds you will be connected. You can now see this looks like a Windows machine, right? So what I can do here is I can go back. Let's go to like the C drive, and you can see here it's a Windows virtual machine running in Azure. That's why it has this Windows Azure folder. And if I run one of my favorite commandlets called chin, which is nothing else than an alias for get computer info, you will see here that I get that it is what kind of like virtual machine that is. You get some information about that virtual machine. So we can see here it's a Windows Server 2016 data center machine. You can also then obviously go out again of that virtual machine. So the next thing I want to show you is, I showed you a little bit of working with scripts, right? And you should really not do that with the way I did it. Like you should use a script repository. So let's go to Cloud Drive scripts again. Or let's go now to scripts. And then what we do, we create a new folder. Let's create a folder for that. And we're going to use a Git repository from a crazy guy who just created like demo Cloud Shell. So there are a couple of just ARM templates and scripts and everything I put in, which I'm going to use or want to use from a Cloud Shell. So I just go and copy that, basically that command. So what are we going to do first? We're going to create the folder here where I want to clone that repository. So do GitHub, and then let's go into that folder, and now just do a git clone. And this is obviously a public repository. You can also do that obviously with private repositories as well. So let's just paste that here. And you can see now it clones my repository with all the scripts and all the files into that folder. And again, also works obviously with Azure DevOps or any Git repository you have, like which is reachable from a Cloud Shell. So if I go into that, you can see here now my cloned GitHub repository with the storage accounts, ARM template, for example. You have here the JSON files available to you, which you actually can use there. Okay, so this is one thing I want to show you when you're working with scripts, right? You should really start, if you're not using it right now, you should start using it, but this is one thing you could do. And again, Git is completely integrated into Cloud Shell as well. So in this quick demo, I want to show you something else, though. This is new, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Who in this room is a developer? .NET developers? Okay, great. Even if you're not .NET developer, you're going to love this, this little thing, if you're working with Cloud Shell. So it's called Web Preview. I'm not sure if anyone tried it before. I think one guy obviously tried it. But let's have a quick look at that. So we are here, again, in the Cloud Shell. And what I have here is basically I have a .NET web app, which I created. I'm super proud of it. Has the fantastic name called New Web App. So it's a .NET Core web app I created here. And before I deploy that, I want to quickly try it out, right? I want to see, okay, how does that run? So I do .NET run. And now this will obviously start up here locally in that container. Now you can see here it says localhost 5000 in the container. How do I reach that now? So what we have here, we have this web app feature. So you can go and configure, and you can map a port and just open that up, and now it connects to my container. It's kind of like a proxy to my container. You can see here very small hello world. Let's close that again. And now I want to do some changes because that's too small. And now I will take all my web design skills, basically, I have, to edit that. So here we have the hello world. It's like, I'm crazy into code, by the way, these days. So let's do hello, Thomas. Oops. Okay. And again, super simple to save and exit. And let's just do another .NET run. And now, since I already have like mapped that, we just need to go to the browser after it's started. Give some time. Okay, you can see again. And if I do a refresh now here, you can I've edited that file in the browser, right? So when I now close that, by the way, let's have a quick look what happens. If I do a refresh, you see I get an error from that. And then I can also close that port mapping again, and then nothing happens anymore, right? So this is a good way if you want to quickly try something, and you want to try out something, and you want to have a port mapping into your container. That also obviously works using the web preview. Okay. Good. So let's quickly recap what we just saw. So we see that there are a lot of third-party tools available, right? I cannot stress enough. There's like not just Microsoft tools, there are a lot of third parties as well. And if you need something additional, you can also install that as well. We also keep these container images up to date. Usually, like I think we do that weekly. It depends a little bit on what the team does, but when we just like do new releases of that. So for example, if you have a new version of the Terraform, then basically we can adjust that in the container, and you don't need to take care of it, right? We have different editors in there. Again, there are like the familiar editors on Unix, like Emacs, VI, Vim, and a lot of them. But there's also this code which we have, which gives you syntax highlighting, which is basically a web version of the Visual Studio Code editor. They don't like that because it doesn't have all the features, and there is something, I think it was announced that Build, which is coming, which is more a little bit like a web coding experience. But this really helps. If you're in Cloud Shell, you just want to do some quick changes, you can do that. And then we saw that we have Visual Studio Code integration. So if you want to run that locally, directly on your machine, you can also do that. And it gives you everything you already had directly on your local machine, right? Again, here are some screens. The only thing you need for the Visual Studio Code integration, or the two things you need, is basically the Azure account extension. And this will then tell you if you run the Visual Code integration with Cloud Shell, then you will also need to install Node.js to basically make that happen, right? but very simple to basically integrate into that. And then we also saw how you can actually integrate with VMs, right? So if you're managing virtual machines and do things like that, you can run like these remoting commands to basically do that as well, right? I like especially a simple thing, but like just running an SSH command directly, like not from your local machine, makes it sometimes super, super easy. And you will see, I will show you that there are even more experience for demos and things like that, where we basically just tell people, look, just run that in Cloud Shell. The reason for that, then we know that everything is set up right. We have the right tools available. SSH just works, or PowerShell remoting just works. You have the right modules in place and things like that, without having the pre-requirements to install something on your machine. And then you also saw how you can basically use Git source control, like you can use your different Git repositories. In my case, I showed it with GitHub, but obviously, again, as I said before, you can also use it with any Git repository out there, which is available in the internet and accessible through that. It also works, again, with private repositories. You just need to authenticate against them. And then I showed you web preview to basically just how you map ports for your applications you want to quickly test in there. Good. So the next thing I want to show, and this is really like, so we saw Cloud Shell, we could saw that we run it in the Azure portal, that we run it on shell.azure.com. We saw that you can run it in Visual Studio, but there are a lot of more places where you can actually run Cloud Shell, or where we use Cloud Shell to help our customers as well. So let's have a quick look at that, that recap a little bit. So here again, the Azure portal, nothing specific. You click on the top. You see I got my Cloud Shell. Again, I can go and browse my cloud drive here. And then shell.azure.com, which I also just showed you before. If I go to my home drive, I can see here, again, my cloud drive available here as well. So I'm not sure if everyone's seen that before, the Microsoft Docs page. So what I want to show you here is, by the way, here's like how you, for example, create a virtual machine in the portal. But there we also have these like examples for PowerShell and CLI. And if you scroll down, I'm not sure if everyone see that, there is a try it button, right? So if you click on try it, it will open that focus mode, which basically gives you the documentation on one side, and it gives you a Cloud Shell experience on the other side. So you don't have to like go from one place to the other. And so guess what? What happens here is it really starts you a Cloud Shell like it would be in the portal. And if we have a quick look here, so if I go, this is really my Cloud Shell, just to show that. So again, you have your cloud drive. If I go in there, you can see here, I have again my personal script folder and also my GitHub folder now. If I go into scripts, you can see here my scripts, and I could basically work from here. However, the good part is here, now I just copy a command here and paste it into the Cloud Shell directly here, and I can go through these steps if I want to try out something or work with the documentation. If I'm done, I just exit focus mode and come back here. And then where we also integrate Cloud Shell is Microsoft Learn. And I will talk a little bit about like Microsoft Learn in a bit. But this is our new learning platform where we have different learning modules, hands-on learning modules. You can then go and say, okay, I'm an administrator. So it gives you all the modules which are, we think it's relevant for you as an administrator. And then you can, for example, go and search also for different modules. We have right now more than a couple of hundred modules in there. So if I go down, there is a module called Create a Linux Virtual Machine. Let's have a look. And so this module really goes through and has some text which you can read, right? So you can go through and learn. It will tell you what that module is about. And this obviously is a very simple one to create a Linux virtual machine, but there's more, if you want to learn more about these technologies, great. So it goes through, sometimes you have like questions and things like that in there which you need to answer. But the great thing here also, we have that sandbox experience. So we have that sandbox which creates you a Cloud Shell container, but it's not linked to your Azure account. You don't need an Azure account to use Microsoft Learn. You just need a Microsoft account to log in. And then we assign you a sandbox Cloud Shell environment or Azure environment, which you then can basically start as a demo environment and learn things. So you can also see here the name is a little bit different. It says Thomas Maurer at Azure. And you see I have a cloud drive, because everyone has a cloud drive. but you can see it's empty, right? It's really an isolated environment. There's nothing to do with my virtual machines or anything to interfere. So I can really go through that learning module, and then basically just also again, like we could do in the documentation, just copy the commands and go through that module without doing that in my own subscription, without having to clean up afterwards. The Microsoft Learn platform does that for you. So you can go through and run commands. So we have a very great experience there, how you can integrate that. Who has tried Microsoft Learn, by the way? Okay, awesome. This is awesome. Really try out Microsoft Learn. There will be much, much more modules. Again, if you have any feedback, like modules which are missing, please contact us and tell us what we need. A part of our team is also to create like a couple of these learning modules. Good. So you could see there are a couple of things where you can access Cloud Shell. Quickly check the time here. But there is more. So we have obviously the Azure portal, we have shell.azure.com, we have the Azure extension in Visual Studio Code, we have the Try It button in Docs and the integration with Microsoft Learn, right, where you can run it. And then we also have something called the Azure mobile app, which I want to show you. Who knows the Azure mobile app? Okay, who has installed the Azure mobile app? Awesome. Good. So before I actually switch to that, I also quickly want to show you this. So if you have used the new Windows Terminal preview, does anyone have installed that? I love that so many hands go up. Awesome. Who likes the new Windows Terminal? For those who haven't, it's still in preview. It's not that it's already like fully functional or everything. Well, it is fully functional, but it's like still, as I said, in preview. It has this great thing, and you can see that on the top right there, which is called like an Azure Cloud Drive directly from your terminal. Right? So you can run multiple things. You can run PowerShell, you can run WSL, everything in that terminal, and it gives you some cool new things. But you can also directly connect your Cloud Shell session now from your terminal directly on your PC. Like kind of similar with Visual Studio Code, but if you're not like into like using this editor and you just want to interact with Cloud Shell, you can also do that here from the Windows terminal. So let's go into a scenario here before I switch. Let's think about, I already left work. It's like, I don't know, let's say 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. I went to a bar, started drinking, right? I got a message or a call from my boss and says, there's something wrong with our Azure environment. There's something not good. You need to do something, or you forgot something, right? So let's switch to my phone. Maybe I should not do that in a bar, by the way, while getting drunk, but that's a different story. So what I can do here, there is an Azure icon. There's the Azure mobile app. And if I open that up, I can browse all the resources. You can also see I can do some actions on like virtual machines. I can stop them, start them, and things like that. But you can also see there is a Cloud Shell button. So I can start Cloud Shell from my phone. And in the bar, while drinking, no, don't drink, don't do that. So I can now go and type and go to my Cloud Drive. And then I have here, for example, my folders. And if I go into scripts again, and you see that I have my scripts, obviously the same thing again in that environment. And I could run like the fix everything script against the Azure, and like everything would be fixed, and I can go back to drinking again. Okay. So we are almost at the end. So in this session, I quickly want to have a recap. So you learned like how to set up Cloud Shell, right? If you want to do a work with Cloud Shell and start accessing your Azure resources, I gave you an overview. If you haven't used it, you know how to. You have seen that we have different tools installed in that console. You have seen, again, the Visual Studio Code and the terminal integration we have there. You saw how we actually can manage Azure VMs and how you can use like source control in the Azure Cloud Shell. Again, there are many other things which I haven't showed you. For example, I just quickly highlighted the Exchange Online module, right? So if you're an Office 365 administrator and you want to work against Exchange Online, you can do that too. There's also stuff for SQL and many other things you can do. So if you want to learn more, we have written a blog post about this where we basically covered like everything I just showed you in that article and goes through, and also has all the links to docs and so on, where you can have a look at it and see how that works. I also regularly update that blog post if there are new features coming out, like the web preview feature. You can see that too. Good, and then the last thing I want to tell you is about our ops team. So if I mentioned our team at the beginning, we also have a blog called itopstalk.com, which we are blogging about IT Pro, IT Ops related features. For example, this can be cloud stuff like I just did, but there's also a lot of like on-prem, like if you're running Windows Server, Active Directory, there are some parts of Office 365, which you can have a look at, and we are a good thing to follow. If you want to interact with us and you're on Twitter, use the hashtag ACOps. This allows you basically, we monitor that hashtag and you can basically interact and like if you have questions. I'm also super happy if you follow me on Twitter and follow my blog if you don't. And with that, I just want to say thank you and open up for some Q&A if you have any.